A forgotten letter resurfaces, revealing hidden love and regret, as Jungkook and Jimin confront a past that was never meant to be found. "I never meant for you to read that." The words slip out too late, breaking the stillness like glass shattering across the wooden floor. Dust floats in the air between them, disturbed by the sudden movement of Jungkook's hand reaching forward, but stopping, hovering, trembling, because Jimin is already holding the letter, already unfolding a past that should have remained buried. The trainee dorm smells faintly of old fabric and something sweeter, like memories left too long in a sealed space. The box lies open between them, its hinges creaking in protest, revealing layers of forgotten years, Polaroids with faded smiles, crumpled lyric sheets, a worn-out bracelet tangled with threads of time. And at the very bottom, the letter. Jimin doesn't look up. His fingers are careful, almost reverent, as if the paper might dissolve under the weight of truth. The silence stretches, heavy and suffocating, until Jungkook feels it pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. "You wrote this," Jimin's voice is barely above a whisper, yet it carries something deeper, something fragile. Jungkook swallows, the dryness in his throat burning. "I was young." "You're still young," Jimin replies, but his tone carries a quiet ache, as if youth itself is no excuse. Jungkook doesn't move closer. He can't. There's a strange kind of fear gripping him, not of Jimin's reaction, but of the version of himself that wrote those words. A version that had been honest in ways he no longer knew how to be. Outside, the wind rattles the windows slightly, a dull tapping that echoes like a heartbeat. The room feels smaller now, closing in around them. Jimin starts reading. Jungkook remembers writing it on a night much like this one, after practice, when exhaustion had stripped away his usual defenses. The others had been asleep, soft breathing filling the room, but he had stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something restless and unnamed stirring inside him. Back then he didn't have the language for it, only feelings that refused to settle. He had written slowly, carefully, as if each word carried a weight he didn't fully understand. Jimin's eyes move across the page, and Jungkook watches every shift in his expression. The subtle tightening of his jaw, the flicker of disbelief, the way his lips part slightly as if trying to catch something slipping through. "You remember this night?" Jimin asks suddenly, still not looking at him. Jungkook nods, though he knows Jimin can't see it. "You couldn't sleep, you kept turning the lights on and off." A faint, almost broken smile touches Jimin's lips. "I thought I was just nervous about evaluations." "You were," Jungkook says softly, "but not only that." Jimin exhales, and it sounds like something unraveling. The letter trembles slightly in his hands now. Jungkook remembers the exact moment he stopped writing. It had been when the words became too real, too dangerous. When he realized that if he gave this letter to Jimin, everything would change, and he wasn't ready for that kind of change. So he folded it, hid it, buried it beneath years of becoming someone else. Until now. Jimin finally looks up. There's something in his eyes that wasn't there before, not just sadness but recognition. As if he's seeing a version of Jungkook he never knew existed. "Why didn't you give it to me?" he asks. The question lands heavier than anything else. Jungkook laughs softly, but there's no humor in it, "Because I was scared." "Of me. Of losing you." The answer comes out before he can stop it, raw and unfiltered. It hangs in the air between them, fragile and impossible to take back. Jimin's gaze softens, but the tears come without warning. They fall quietly, tracing slow paths down his cheeks, disappearing at the edge of his jaw. He doesn't wipe them away. Jungkook feels something twist inside him, a deep, aching regret that has been waiting for this moment all along. "I thought," Jimin starts, then stops, his voice catching. He looks back down at the letter as if searching for something he might have missed. "I thought I imagined it, the way you used to look at me, the way you stayed up when I couldn't sleep. I thought it was just me wanting it to mean more." Jungkook shakes his head, stepping closer now despite the fear clawing at him. "It wasn't just you." "Then why does it feel like I'm reading about a stranger?" Jimin's voice cracks, and this time he does wipe his tears away, but more follow, relentless. "You never said anything, not even after." "After what?" "After everything changed." The words carry a quiet accusation, one Jungkook knows he deserves. He thinks about the years that followed, the distance that crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The unspoken things that built walls between them. The way they learned to exist side by side without ever really confronting what had once been so close to the surface. I thought it was too late, Jungkook admits. Jimin lets out a hollow laugh. It was never too late, you just decided it was. That hits harder than anything else. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The room feels suspended in time, caught between what was and what could have been. Jungkook looks at the box, at the remnants of their past scattered across the floor. Each item feels like a fragment of a story they never fully told. I kept it, he says quietly. Jimin glances at him, confusion flickering in his tear-filled eyes. The letter, Jungkook continues. I couldn't throw it away, even when everything changed, even when I told myself it didn't matter anymore. Jimin studies him for a long moment, as if trying to piece together the truth behind his words. And now, he asks. Jungkook hesitates. Because now is complicated. Now is filled with years of silence, of missed chances, of things that can't be undone. But also, now is this moment. You're reading it, he says finally, so I guess it still matters. Jimin looks back at the letter, his grip tightening slightly. It does, he whispers. The simplicity of it is almost overwhelming. Jungkook feels the weight in his chest shift, not disappearing, but changing, becoming something he can finally face. Then what do we do, he asks. Jimin doesn't answer right away. He folds the letter carefully, the same way Jungkook had done years ago, as if preserving it once more. But instead of putting it back in the box, he holds onto it, pressing it lightly against his chest. We stop pretending, he says. Jungkook exhales, a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for years. The wind outside has quieted, and the room feels different now, still heavy, still filled with unresolved emotions, but no longer suffocating. Jimin steps closer, closing the distance that had once felt impossible to bridge. For the first time in a long time, they stand facing each other without anything in between. No unspoken words. No hidden letters. Just the truth, fragile and imperfect, but finally out in the open. And somehow that feels like a beginning. The door slams harder than either of them expects. Jungkook's hand is still on the handle, his breath uneven, his pulse hammering in his ears like a warning he can't ignore. Jimin stands a few steps away, the letter still clutched in his hand, but something in his expression has shifted. Softer, yes, but also sharper, like he's bracing for something inevitable. You think this fixes everything? Jimin's voice cuts through the room, no longer fragile, no longer quiet. Jungkook stiffens, I didn't say that. But you're standing there like it does, Jimin fires back, stepping closer, his eyes burning now, not just with tears but with years of something unresolved. Like saying I was scared suddenly makes all of it okay. It doesn't, Jungkook says quickly, his voice rising despite himself. I know it doesn't. Then what does it do? Jimin challenges, because from where I'm standing it just feels like another excuse. The words hit harder than Jungkook expects. He flinches, not visibly, but internally like something old and bruised has been pressed too hard. You think it was easy for me, Jungkook snaps, the frustration finally breaking through. You think I didn't think about this every day, about what would have happened if I gave you that letter. Jimin laughs, but it's hollow, sharp. At least you had the choice. Silence crashes down between them again. That Jungkook didn't expect. Jimin takes a step back now, running a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling slightly. Do you know what it's like, he says more quietly, to feel something so strongly and have no idea if it's real or if you're just making it up in your head? Jungkook doesn't answer. Because he does know. But he also knows that his silence back then made it worse. I kept second-guessing everything, Jimin continues, his voice tightening. Every look, every moment, it all felt like it meant something and then you just pull away, like none of it mattered. It mattered, Jungkook insists. Then why did you act like it did? The question comes fast, sharp, impossible to dodge. Jungkook opens his mouth, then closes it again. Because the truth isn't simple, it isn't clean. I didn't know how to handle it, he says finally, his voice quieter now but no less intense. I didn't know what it meant, what it would change. Jimin scoffs, but there's less bite in it now. So you decided for both of us. I was trying to protect what we had. And in doing that, you ruined it anyway. Jimin's voice cracks again, the anger breaking apart just enough to reveal the hurt underneath. Do you even hear yourself? Jungkook takes a step forward, desperation creeping in now. I didn't want to lose you. You already did, Jimin shouts. The words echo in the room, louder than anything else that's been said. For a moment, neither of them moves. Jungkook feels something inside him collapse under the weight of that truth. Maybe, he says slowly, his voice rough, but you're still here. Jimin freezes. The tension shifts, subtle but undeniable. Don't, Jimin warns, his voice lower now, almost dangerous. Don't twist this into something it's not. I'm not twisting anything, Jungkook says, holding his ground. You're here, you read the letter, you didn't walk away. Jimin's grip tightens around the paper. I almost did. But you didn't. Their eyes lock, and for a second everything else falls away. The years, the distance, the things left unsaid. There's something raw in that gaze, something unfinished. Why, Jungkook asks softer now. Jimin exhales shakily, looking away for just a second before meeting his eyes again. Because I needed to know if it was real. And now. Jimin hesitates. The room feels too quiet, too exposed. It was, he admits. The words land gently, but they carry weight. Jungkook nods, swallowing hard. It still is. Jimin's breath catches. That's not fair, he says almost immediately, but there's no real force behind it. You don't get to just say that now like nothing's changed. Everything's changed, Jungkook agrees, but that doesn't mean it disappeared. Jimin looks at him like he's searching for something. Truth, maybe, or proof that this isn't just another moment that will slip through his fingers. You're serious, he says almost to himself. I always was. Another silence, but this one feels different, less suffocating, more uncertain. Jimin glances down at the letter again, then back at Jungkook. You really kept this all these years, he asks. Jungkook nods, even when I told myself I shouldn't. Why? Jungkook takes a breath, his chest rising and falling slowly. Because it was the only time I was completely honest. Jimin's expression softens again, but there's still hesitation there, still doubt. And now, he asks, are you being honest now? Jungkook doesn't look away. Yes. The answer is immediate, unwavering. Jimin studies him for a long moment, as if weighing every word, every expression. Then slowly he steps closer. Close enough that Jungkook can see the faint redness in his eyes, the traces of tears still clinging to his lashes. You don't get to disappear again, Jimin says quietly but firmly. If we do this, whatever this is, you don't get to hide when it gets complicated. Jungkook nods without hesitation. I won't. And no more letters you never send, Jimin adds, a faint hint of something almost teasing beneath the seriousness. Jungkook huffs a quiet breath. Deal. For a moment they just stand there, the air between them charged but no longer hostile. Then Jimin does something unexpected. He reaches out and places the letter in Jungkook's hand. You keep it, he says. Jungkook blinks surprised. I thought. I don't need it anymore, Jimin interrupts gently. I already know what it says. Jungkook looks down at the folded paper, then back up at Jimin. And what does it say, he asks. Jimin's lips curve into the faintest smile, something soft and real. It says you were a coward, he replies, and Jungkook almost groans. But then Jimin steps closer, his voice dropping just enough to change everything. But it also says you loved me. Jungkook's breath catches. The word hangs there, fragile and undeniable. Jimin watches him carefully as if waiting, for denial, for hesitation, for anything that might break the moment. But Jungkook doesn't look away. I did, he says. A beat. I do. This time, the silence that follows isn't heavy. It's full. Jimin exhales slowly, and something in his posture finally relaxes, like a tension he's carried for years is beginning to loosen. Then don't waste it again, he says. Jungkook nods, his grip tightening slightly around the letter. I won't. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like a promise made out of fear, but one made out of certainty. I heard everything. The voice comes from the half-open door, quiet but sharp enough to slice through whatever fragile understanding had just begun to form. Both of them turn at the same time, the air shifting instantly, tension snapping back into place like a pulled wire. Taehyung leans against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, but his eyes are anything but neutral. Jimin steps back immediately, as if burned, the space between him and Jungkook reappearing in an instant. "How long have you been standing there?" Jimin asks, his voice steady but his fingers curl tightly at his sides. "Long enough," Taehyung replies, pushing himself off the frame and stepping into the room. His gaze flickers between them, lingering for just a second too long on the letter still in Jungkook's hand. Didn't mean to interrupt, but it's kind of hard not to when voices start getting loud. Jungkook exhales slowly, already feeling the situation slipping out of control. It's not what it looks like. Taehyung lets out a quiet laugh, low and disbelieving. Really, because it looks exactly like what it is. Jimin's jaw tightens. And what is that exactly? Taehyung shrugs, but there's tension in the movement. Old feelings, bad timing, and a whole lot of things that should have stayed buried. "That's not your call to make," Jungkook says, sharper now. Taehyung's eyes snap to him. "Isn't it?" he counters. "Because last time I checked, we don't get the luxury of messing things up for ourselves, not like this." The words land heavily, loaded with implications that don't need to be said out loud. Jimin looks away, running a hand over his face. "We're not messing anything up." Taehyung scoffs. "You really believe that?" "Yes," Jimin snaps, his patience thinning. "Because this," he gestures between himself and Jungkook, frustration spilling over. "This isn't something new, it's something we never dealt with." "And you think now is the right time?" Taehyung challenges. "After everything, after all the pressure, the expectations, after what people already say about us." Jungkook's grip tightens around the letter. "Since when do we let what people say decide anything for us?" Taehyung steps closer, his expression hardening. "Since it can destroy everything we've worked for." The room falls silent again, but this time it's heavier, more suffocating than before. Jimin's voice comes quieter now but no less firm. "You think I don't know that?" Taehyung looks at him, something flickering in his eyes, something complicated. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because I'm tired," Jimin admits, the words slipping out like something he's been holding in for too long. "I'm tired of pretending things don't matter when they do. I'm tired of acting like I don't feel something just because it's inconvenient." Taehyung's gaze softens for a fraction of a second, but then it hardens again. "And what happens when this something costs you everything?" Jungkook steps in before Jimin can answer. "It won't." Taehyung turns to him sharply. "You don't know that." "I know I'm not running away again," Jungkook says, his voice steady, unwavering. Taehyung studies him, searching for hesitation, for doubt, but there isn't any. "That's brave," he says finally, "or stupid." "Maybe both," Jungkook replies. Jimin lets out a small, humorless laugh. "Sounds about right." For a moment the tension eases just slightly, but it doesn't last. Taehyung shakes his head, packing a few steps across the room like he's trying to make sense of something that refuses to settle. "You think I'm the bad guy here," he says, quieter now. "Like I'm trying to stop you for no reason." "No one said that," Jimin replies. "You didn't have to." Jungkook exhales, running a hand through his hair. "Then tell us the reason." Taehyung stops. His back is to them now, shoulders tense, hands clenched at his sides. For a long moment he doesn't speak. And then, "Because I've seen how this ends." The words are low, almost reluctant. Jimin frowns. "What does that mean?" Taehyung turns slowly, his expression no longer guarded, but something else entirely, something raw. "It means," he says carefully, "that I've watched people lose everything over something they thought they could control." Jungkook narrows his eyes. "We're not people, we're us." "And that's exactly why it's dangerous," Taehyung fires back. "Because you think you're different, because you think your feelings are strong enough to survive anything." Jimin steps forward now, frustration building again. "So what, we just ignore it, pretend none of this happened?" "Yes," Taehyung says immediately. The answer is so quick, so certain, that it stuns both of them into silence. "That's not living," Jimin says quietly. "That's surviving," Taehyung counters. And sometimes that's the only thing that matters. Jungkook shakes his head, not to me. Taehyung looks at him, something almost desperate flashing in his eyes now. Then you're risking more than just yourself. The implication is clear. Jimin notices it too. This isn't just about us, is it? He says slowly. Taehyung doesn't answer. That's answer enough. Jungkook feels a cold weight settle in his chest. What aren't you telling us? Taehyung hesitates. And that hesitation is louder than anything else he said. Jimin steps closer, his voice firm. If you know something, you don't get to keep it to yourself. Taehyung laughs softly, but there's no humor in it. You think telling you will make this easier? No, Jimin admits, but not knowing makes it worse. Another pause. Another moment where everything hangs in the balance. Then Taehyung exhales sharply, like he's making a decision he doesn't want to make. There are rumors, he says. Jungkook frowns. There are always rumors. Not like this. Jimin's stomach drops slightly. What kind of rumors? Taehyung looks between them, his expression serious now, any trace of sarcasm gone. About you, he says, both of you. The air shifts again, colder this time. Jungkook's grip tightens unconsciously. What about us? Taehyung hesitates for just a second too long. People are starting to notice, he says finally. The way you look at each other, the way you act when you think no one's paying attention. Jimin feels his chest tighten. That's ridiculous, Jungkook says, but there's a crack in his confidence now. Is it? Taehyung challenges. Because if I notice, don't you think others will too? Silence. Heavy, undeniable. Jimin looks down, his mind racing. Every moment, every glance, every near touch, it all flashes through his head like a series of mistakes he hadn't realized were so visible. What happens if they're right? He asks quietly. Taehyung doesn't hesitate this time. Then you lose control of your own story. The words hit hard. Jungkook steps closer to Jimin instinctively, but this time Jimin doesn't close the distance. Instead, he steps back. Not far, but enough. Jungkook notices immediately, the movement small but devastating. Jimin. I need a second, Jimin says quickly, his voice tight. Taehyung watches the exchange, something unreadable settling over his features. This is what I was talking about, he says quietly. It's not just about how you feel, it's about what happens when everyone else starts to see it too. Jungkook looks between them, frustration and fear tangling together in his chest. So what are you saying, he asks, that we just stop? Taehyung doesn't answer right away. Because he knows the weight of that question. And so does Jimin. Finally, Taehyung speaks. I'm saying, he says carefully, that once this crosses a certain line, there's no going back. Jimin closes his eyes briefly, the letter still pressed tightly in his hand. Jungkook watches him, waiting, hopping for something. For an answer. For a choice. For anything that will tell him this isn't slipping away again. But when Jimin opens his eyes, there's something different in them now. Not just emotion. But conflict. Deep, unresolved, and far from over. I kissed someone else. The confession drops into the room like a detonation, quiet in volume but violent in impact. For a second, even the air seems to stop moving. Jungkook doesn't react immediately. It's not that he didn't hear it. It's that his mind refuses to process it. Jimin stands there, shoulders tense, chin slightly lifted like he's bracing for the fallout. The letter is still in his hand, crumpled now, no longer handled with care but with something closer to desperation. Taehyung goes completely still. Say that again, Jungkook finally manages, his voice low, controlled in a way that feels far more dangerous than if he had shouted. Jimin doesn't look away. I kissed someone else. Who? The question comes instantly. It doesn't matter. It does to me. The tension spikes, sharp and immediate. Jimin exhales through his nose, frustration flickering across his face. Why? So you can compare, so you can decide if it means something or if it does. Jungkook takes a step closer, his eyes locked onto Jimin's. Because you just told me this right after. He gestures vaguely, like the moment between them is still hanging there, fragile and unfinished, all of this. And what did you expect? Jimin fires back, his voice rising now, emotions spilling over. That I've just been waiting, frozen in time while you figured yourself out. That's not what I'm saying. But that's how it sounds, Jimin cuts in. You don't get to show up with a confession years too late and act like nothing happened in between. Jungkook's jaw tightens. So this is what that is, something that happened in between. Jimin hesitates. Just for a second. And that second is enough. Jungkook lets out a hollow laugh, stepping back this time, the distance now coming from him instead. Wow. It wasn't like that, Jimin says quickly. Then what was it like? Jungkook demands, because from where I'm standing it sounds pretty clear. It was confusing, Jimin admits, his voice softer now but no less intense. Everything was confusing. You were distant, you were different, and I didn't know if I imagined everything or if I just meant nothing to you. You didn't mean nothing to me, Jungkook says sharply. But I didn't know that, Jimin snaps, that's the whole point. The words echo, heavy and unavoidable. Tiang shifts slightly, finally breaking his silence. Maybe we should. No, Jungkook cuts him off without even looking. You wanted honesty, you're getting it. Taehyung's expression darkens, but he doesn't interrupt again. Jungkook turns back to Jimin, his gaze intense, searching. Did it mean something? Jimin doesn't answer right away. And that silence is loud. Jimin, Jungkook presses. It wasn't supposed to, Jimin says finally. That's not the answer Jungkook wanted. And did it, he asks quieter now. Jimin's grip tightens on the letter, his knuckles whitening. I don't know. That's not good enough. It's the truth, Jimin's voice cracks again, frustration and emotion tangling together. I was trying to move on. I was trying to convince myself that whatever I felt for you wasn't real or wasn't possible. Jungkook feels something twist painfully in his chest. So you replaced it. I tried to, Jimin corrects, his eyes glistening again, but it didn't work. The words hang there, uncertain but honest. Jungkook studies him, searching for any sign of doubt, any hint that this is just something said in the heat of the moment. But Jimin doesn't look away. Then why tell me now, Jungkook asks. Jimin laughs weakly. Because you deserve to know the whole truth, not just the version that makes this easier. Easier, Jungkook repeats, almost incredulous. You think any of this is easy? No, Jimin admits. But it would be easier if I pretended I've just been waiting for you this whole time, if I acted like nothing else ever touched me. Jungkook looks away briefly, running a hand over his face. The emotions are too much, too fast, anger, jealousy, regret, all colliding at once. Taehyung watches them both carefully, his silence now heavier than before. Was it recent? Jungkook asks suddenly. Jimin hesitates. Jimin. Yes. Jungkook lets out a sharp breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. Of course it was. It didn't mean what this means, Jimin says quickly. You don't get to decide that for me, Jungkook replies, his voice colder now. I'm not deciding it for you, I'm telling you how I feel. And how do you think I feel? Jungkook challenges. Stepping forward again, the distance closing in a way that feels almost confrontational now. Standing here, finding out that while I was holding on to something for years, you were living, Jimin cuts in, his tone sharp again. Yeah, I was, because I didn't have the luxury of knowing how you felt. That stops Jungkook. Because it's true. And they both know it. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Jimin says more quietly now. I was trying to survive you. The words hit harder than anything else. Jungkook's expression falters, the anger flickering into something more vulnerable. Taehyung exhales slowly, rubbing the back of his neck like he's carrying tension that doesn't belong entirely to him. This is exactly what I meant, he mutters. It's already messy, and it's only going to get worse. Jungkook ignores him. His focus is entirely on Jimin. Do you still see him? He asks. Jimin shakes his head immediately. No. Why not? Jimin hesitates again, but this time the answer comes quicker. Because it didn't feel right. Jungkook's breath catches slightly. Because of me. Jimin meets his eyes. Yes. The room goes quiet again. Not tense. Not explosive. Just still. Taehyung watches the exchange, something shifting in his expression, something conflicted, almost reluctant. Jungkook steps closer, slower this time, like he's approaching something fragile. And now, he asks. Jimin swallows, his voice barely above a whisper. Now I don't know what's right anymore. That honesty is raw, unfiltered. Jungkook nods slowly, then we figure it out. It's not that simple. It doesn't have to be simple, Jungkook says, it just has to be real. Jimin looks at him, really looks at him, as if trying to decide whether this version of Jungkook is someone he can trust. And what if it falls apart, he asks quietly. Jungkook doesn't hesitate. Then at least we didn't lie to ourselves. Taehyung lets out a quiet, almost defeated sigh. You two really don't make this easy. Jimin glances at him briefly. We're not trying to. I can see that, Taehyung mutters. Another pause settles, but this one feels different again. Less chaotic, more like the aftermath of a storm. Jungkook reaches out, not quite touching Jimin, but close enough that the space between them feels charged again. No more half-truths, he says softly. If we do this, we do it knowing everything. Jimin nods slowly, everything. And no running, Jungkook adds. Jimin lets out a faint breath, no running. Taehyung watches them, his expression unreadable, but there's something heavier in his gaze now, something unresolved, something he's still not saying. And for the first time, it's clear that this isn't just about Jungkook and Jimin anymore. There's something else beneath the surface. Something waiting. And it's not going to stay hidden for long. You think I didn't know? Taehyung's voice is quieter this time, but it cuts deeper than anything he said before. Jungkook and Jimin both turn toward him at the same time, the fragile balance they had just begun to rebuild cracking again under the weight of something new, something darker. Jimin frowns, know what? Taehyung lets out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair, his composure slipping for the first time. About you two, he says, gesturing between them, about the way this was never just friendship. Jungkook stiffens, you're making assumptions. Taehyung laughs softly, but there's no humor in it. Am I? His gaze sharpens. You think I didn't notice the way you used to look at him, the way you'd drop everything the second he needed you, or how you'd both go quiet whenever anyone got too close to figuring it out? Silence. Heavy, guilty. Jimin looks away first. That doesn't mean anything, he mutters, but his voice lacks conviction. It means everything, Taehyung counters immediately. You just didn't want to admit it. Jungkook exhales, frustration creeping back in. So what, you've just been watching this whole time, waiting for it to blow up? Taehyung's jaw tightens. I wasn't waiting for anything, I was trying to keep it from happening. Why, Jimin asks suddenly, his voice sharper now. Why do you care so much? The question lands harder than expected. Taehyung freezes. For a moment he says nothing. And that silence again says too much. Jungkook narrows his eyes. Yeah, he presses, why do you care? Taehyung looks between them, something conflicted flickering in his expression before it hardens into something more defensive. Because someone has to think about the consequences, he says. That's not an answer, Jimin pushes. It is when you're the only one being realistic. No, Jungkook cuts in, his voice low and dangerous now. It's an excuse. Taehyung's gaze snaps to him. Excuse for what? For interfering, Jungkook says bluntly. The air shifts again, tension rising fast. I'm not interfering, Taehyung replies, his tone tightening. I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake. And you get to decide what's a mistake, Jungkook challenges, stepping closer. If it risks everything we've built, yes. Jimin lets out a frustrated breath, stepping between them before the tension escalates further. Stop, both of you. They don't listen. You're acting like this is just some reckless impulse, Jungkook continues, his voice rising. Like we haven't thought about it. Have you? Taehyung fires back. Or are you just reacting because you finally said something out loud? Jungkook falters for half a second. And Taehyung sees it. That's what I thought, he says quietly. Jimin clenches his fists. You don't know what we've been through. Then tell me, Taehyung snaps, his patience finally breaking. Because from where I'm standing, all I see is two people who let something build for years without dealing with it, and now suddenly it's supposed to be worth risking everything. It is worth it, Jungkook says without hesitation. Taehyung laughs again, sharper this time. You say that now, but what happens when it's not just about you anymore, when people start asking questions, when it turns into something you can't control? Jimin's voice cuts in, quieter but no less intense. You keep talking about consequences like they're already happening. Because they are, Taehyung says. That stops both of them. Jungkook frowns. What does that mean? Taehyung hesitates again. But this time it's different. This time it feels heavier. There was a meeting, he says finally. Jimin's stomach drops. What kind of meeting? Taehyung looks at him, something almost apologetic in his eyes, but not enough to soften the blow. Management, he says, a few days ago. Jungkook's grip tightens around the letter again. About what? Taehyung exhales slowly. About rumors, about image, about certain dynamics within the group. The implication lands hard. Jimin feels a cold wave of realization wash over him. They're watching us. They've always been watching, Taehyung replies. They're just paying closer attention now. Jungkook shakes his head, disbelief and anger mixing together. That doesn't mean anything, they don't know. They don't need to know, Taehyung interrupts. They just need to suspect. Silence crashes down again. Jimin feels his chest tighten, his thoughts spiraling. Every moment, every glance, every near touch suddenly feels exposed, like something private has been dragged into the light without his consent. What exactly did they say? He asks quietly. Taehyung looks at him carefully, that if anything starts to affect the group's image, they'll step in. Jungkook scoffs, they can't control everything. Taehyung's expression hardens, you'd be surprised. Jimin looks between them, his heart racing now for a completely different reason. So what, we're just supposed to pretend none of this exists? Again. Taehyung doesn't answer immediately. Because he knows that's exactly what he's asking. Jungkook steps closer to Jimin, his voice firm. No. Taehyung's gaze sharpens, you don't get it. No, Jungkook shoots back. You don't get it, I spent years pretending this didn't exist, I'm not doing that again. And if it costs you everything, Taehyung presses. Jungkook doesn't hesitate, then it does. Jimin turns to him, startled by the certainty in his voice. Jungkook. I mean it, Jungkook says, softer now but no less serious. I'm done living like this doesn't matter. Jimin's chest tightens. Because part of him wants to believe that. Wants to hold on to that certainty. But another part, quieter, more cautious, remembers everything Taehyung just said. This isn't just about you, Taehyung says, his voice lower now, more controlled. It's about all of us. Jungkook's expression flickers just for a second. And Taehyung sees it. That's what I thought, he murmurs. Jimin exhales shakily, stepping back, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he mutters. We're standing here arguing about feelings like we're not about to get dragged into something way bigger than us. Exactly, Taehyung says. But that doesn't mean we just shut it down, Jimin adds, his voice rising again. It means we figure it out. And how do you plan to do that? Taehyung challenges. Jimin looks at him, something stubborn and determined settling in his expression. Carefully. Jungkook lets out a quiet breath, nodding slightly. Together. Taehyung studies them both, his gaze lingering on the space between them. The tension, the connection, the undeniable truth of something that refuses to be ignored. You're serious, he says finally. Yes, they both answer almost at the same time. That alone says enough. Taehyung closes his eyes briefly, like he's trying to push down something he doesn't want to feel. When he opens them again, there's something different there. Not just frustration. Not just concern. Something deeper. Something personal. You really have no idea what you're stepping into, he says quietly. Jimin's voice softens just slightly, then tell us. Taehyung hesitates. Longer this time. And when he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. Because if this comes out, he says, his gaze locking onto Jungkook for a split second before shifting back to Jimin, it's not just your secret that gets exposed. Jimin frowns. What does that mean? Taehyung swallows. And for the first time, there's real fear in his eyes. It means, he says slowly, that I'm part of it too. The words hang in the air, heavy, confusing, impossible to ignore. Jungkook blinks. What are you talking about? Taehyung doesn't answer right away. Because now the truth is no longer just theirs. And whatever he's about to say next is going to change everything. You were never the only one I was watching. Taehyung's voice is steady now, but there's something underneath it, something raw, something that has been buried for far too long. Jimin feels it immediately. Jungkook too. The room seems to shrink again, walls pressing inward as the weight of those words settles between them. What does that mean? Jungkook asks, slower this time, cautious, like he's stepping into something he doesn't fully understand yet. Taehyung exhales through his nose, his gaze dropping briefly to the floor before lifting again, meeting Jimin's eyes first. That letter, he says quietly, nodding toward Jungkook's hand, you think that was the only one that never got sent? Jimin's breath catches. Jungkook's fingers tighten instinctively around the paper. No, Jungkook says immediately, almost defensive. Don't twist this into something else. I'm not twisting anything, Taehyung replies. I'm telling you that you weren't the only one too afraid to say something. Silence. A different kind of silence this time. One filled with realization creeping in too fast. Jimin's voice is barely audible when he speaks. You're saying what exactly? Taehyung doesn't look away from him. I'm saying I knew how you looked at him, he gestures slightly toward Jungkook, because I knew that feeling. Jimin's heart stutters. Jungkook frowns, confusion and disbelief colliding. You're not making sense. Taehyung lets out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. That's because you never paid attention. That's not fair, Jungkook snaps. No, Taehyung agrees softly, it's not. The words land heavier than expected. Jimin takes a small step back, his mind racing now, piecing together moments he had never questioned before. Taehyung's quiet observations, the way he would sometimes linger a second too long, the things he didn't say. Taehyung, Jimin's voice trembles slightly. Are you saying you? Yes. The answer is immediate. Unhesitating. And devastating in its simplicity. Jungkook's eyes widen. Since when? Taehyung shrugs faintly, but there's tension in his shoulders. Long enough. That's not an answer, Jungkook presses, frustration rising again, but this time laced with something else, something more complicated. Since before you even wrote that letter, Taehyung says. The words hit like a shockwave. Jimin feels his chest tighten painfully. That's impossible, Jungkook says, shaking his head. You never. Of course I didn't, Taehyung cuts in, sharper now. What was I supposed to do? Compete with something that was already there, something neither of you were willing to admit but everyone could feel. Jimin swallows hard, his throat dry. You should have said something. Taehyung's expression twists slightly, something pained flashing across his face. And risk ruining everything back then, when none of us even understood what this was. So instead you just, watched? Jungkook asks, his voice rising again. Yes, Taehyung says, his tone suddenly firm. I watched, I waited, and then I moved on. The last part lands strangely. Jimin notices it. Jungkook notices it too. But not really, Jimin says quietly. Taehyung doesn't respond. And that silence is all the confirmation they need. This is insane, Jungkook mutters, packing a few steps like he's trying to shake off the intensity of the moment. You're telling me all this time you. I felt something, Taehyung corrects. Don't make it bigger than it is. It already is, Jimin says, his voice strained. You just dropped this on us like it doesn't change everything. Taehyung lets out a humorless laugh. Everything was already changing, I just stopped pretending I wasn't part of it. Jimin looks at him, really looks at him, and suddenly there's a new layer to everything. A perspective he had never considered, a truth that had been right there but hidden. Is that why you were trying to stop us? He asks. Taehyung hesitates. Then nods. Partly. Jungkook scoffs, crossing his arms. That's messed up. Yeah, Taehyung agrees, it is. The honesty catches them off guard. I didn't want to see you get hurt, Taehyung continues, his voice quieter now. Either of you, and I definitely didn't want to make things worse by adding myself into something that was already complicated. Jimin's chest aches at that. You should have trusted us, he says. Taehyung's gaze softens, but only slightly. You didn't even trust each other. That hits hard. Jungkook looks away, jaw tightening again. Jimin doesn't argue. Because he knows it's true. So what now? Jungkook asks after a moment, his voice calmer but still tense. What, we just pretend this is normal? Taehyung shrugs lightly. It was already normal, you just didn't know. That's not comforting, Jungkook mutters. It's not supposed to be. Jimin exhales slowly, trying to steady himself, but everything feels off balance now, like the ground beneath him has shifted. You said you moved on, he says, looking at Taehyung again. Did you? Taehyung meets his eyes. And for a moment, something unspoken passes between them. I tried to, he says finally. That answer feels too familiar. Too close to something Jimin himself had said not long ago. Jungkook notices it too. Of course you did, he mutters under his breath. Taehyung's gaze flickers toward him. Don't start. I'm not starting anything, Jungkook replies, but his tone suggests otherwise. I'm just trying to figure out where this leaves us. Us, Taehyung repeats, raising an eyebrow slightly. Jungkook hesitates. Because he doesn't know how to define that anymore. Not after this. Jimin looks between them, his heart racing again, the tension building in a completely different way now. This isn't just about us anymore, he says quietly. No one argues. Because it's true. There's too much now, too many emotions, too many truths colliding all at once. And the rumors, Jimin adds after a moment, the management thing. Taehyung exhales, rubbing the back of his neck again. That's still a problem. Jungkook scoffs, of course it is. But now it's a bigger one, Taehyung continues. Because if anyone even starts to suspect there's more going on. They won't, Jungkook cuts in. You don't know that, Taehyung replies immediately. And you don't know that they will. The tension spikes again, sharp and immediate. Stop, Jimin says, stepping between them again, his voice firmer this time. This isn't helping. They both fall silent. Jimin looks at each of them, his chest rising and falling unevenly. This is already complicated enough, he continues. We don't need to make it worse by turning on each other. Taehyung looks away first. Jungkook exhales slowly. Another silence settles, but this one feels heavier, more uncertain than any before. So what do we do? Jungkook asks. Jimin hesitates. Because for the first time, he really doesn't know. Not with all of this. Not with everything that's been revealed. Taehyung answers instead. We survive it, he says quietly. Jungkook frowns, that's not a plan. It's the only one we've got. Jimin looks down at the letter still in his hand, the paper now wrinkled, worn from everything it has been through, much like them. Then he looks up. At Jungkook. At Taehyung. And something shifts in his expression. Not certainty. Not clarity. But something stronger than hesitation. If we're going to survive this, he says slowly, then we do it without lying anymore, not to each other, not to ourselves. Taehyung studies him carefully. Jungkook nods almost immediately. No more lies, he agrees. Taehyung hesitates. Just for a second. Then, fine. The word is quiet, but it carries weight. A fragile agreement. A dangerous one. Because honesty like this doesn't make things easier. It makes them real. And reality is far more complicated than anything they've been trying to avoid. Then choose. The word doesn't come from anger. It comes from something far worse, something sharp, desperate, and on the edge of breaking. Jimin's voice trembles slightly after he says it, but he doesn't take it back. Jungkook stares at him, stunned. What? You heard me, Jimin says, more firmly this time, even though his chest feels like it's caving in. If we're really done lying, then we don't get to keep everything halfway anymore. Not after this. Taehyung's head snaps toward him. Jimin. No, Jimin cuts him off, shaking his head. I'm serious. We can't keep standing here pretending this is something we can just figure out slowly while everything else builds around us. Jungkook steps closer, his voice low, confused but intense. You're asking me to choose between you and him. I'm asking you to be honest about what you want, Jimin shoots back. That's not the same thing. It is right now. Silence crashes down again, heavier than anything before. Taehyung watches them, something dark and conflicted settling in his expression. You think forcing this is going to make it better, he says quietly, because it won't. I'm not forcing anything, Jimin replies, though his voice wavers. I'm just done pretending we can avoid it. Jungkook runs a hand through his hair, packing once, twice, like he's trying to outrun the pressure closing in around him. This is insane, he mutters. You're turning this into something it doesn't have to be. It already is, Jimin says. You just don't want to face it. And you do, Jungkook challenges, stopping in front of him again. You think this is fair, dropping everything on me at once and expecting me to just, decide? Jimin's eyes glisten, but he doesn't look away. I've been deciding for years without even knowing it, he says softly. You're just catching up. That hits harder than anything else. Taehyung exhales slowly, tension radiating off him. This isn't how this should go. Then how should it go? Jimin asks, turning to him now. Because from where I'm standing, the longer we wait, the worse it gets. Taehyung doesn't answer immediately. Because part of him knows Jimin is right. And that makes it worse. Jungkook looks between them, frustration boiling over. You're both acting like I'm the only one who has to decide something. Jimin shakes his head. I already made my choice. Jungkook's breath catches. And what is it? Jimin hesitates. For just a second. Then, you. The word is barely above a whisper. But it lands like a thunderclap. Taehyung's jaw tightens, his gaze dropping for a split second before he forces it back up. Jungkook doesn't move. Doesn't breathe. Don't say things like that unless you mean them, he says quietly. I do, Jimin replies immediately. The certainty in his voice is almost terrifying. Jungkook feels it deep in his chest, something pulling him forward, something he's been holding back for too long. But then, Taehyung laughs. It's soft. Bitter. Of course you do, he says. Jungkook turns sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means this was always going to happen, Taehyung replies, his voice controlled but tight. The second you stopped pretending, everything else became irrelevant. That's not true, Jimin says, frowning. Isn't it? Taehyung looks at him now, something raw in his eyes. You didn't even hesitate. Jimin falters. You said his name like it was already decided, Taehyung continues. Like I was never really part of the equation. That's not fair, Jimin says, his voice breaking slightly. You never gave me the chance to. To what? Taehyung cuts in sharper now. Choose me. The question hangs there, dangerous and heavy. Jimin doesn't answer. Because he doesn't know how. And that silence says everything. Taehyung nods slowly like he expected it, even if it still hurts. Yeah, he murmurs, that's what I thought. Jungkook shifts uncomfortably, guilt creeping in despite himself. Taehyung. Don't, Taehyung says immediately, holding up a hand. Don't do that thing where you pretend you understand how I feel. You don't. Jungkook's jaw tightens. You don't know that. I do, Taehyung replies, because you were never on the outside of this. That lands harder than Jungkook expects. Jimin looks between them, his chest tightening again. This isn't about sides. It is, Taehyung says quietly, whether you want it to be or not. Silence settles again, but this time it feels final. Like something is breaking apart, piece by piece. Jungkook looks at Taehyung, his voice softer now. You said you moved on. Taehyung huffs a quiet breath. I said I tried. And now? Taehyung hesitates. And that hesitation is enough. Jimin closes his eyes briefly, the weight of everything pressing down on him. I didn't want to hurt you, he says, looking at Taehyung again. I know, Taehyung replies. But I did anyway. Yeah, Taehyung says softly, you did. There's no anger in his voice now. And somehow that makes it worse. Jungkook steps forward slightly, his voice careful. This doesn't have to end like this. Taehyung lets out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. It already did. No, Jungkook insists, we can still. Still what? Taehyung interrupts. Go back, pretend I didn't say anything, pretend you didn't just look at each other like that. Jungkook falls silent. Because he knows they can't. Jimin swallows hard, so what are you saying? Taehyung looks at both of them, his expression unreadable now. I'm saying you made your choice, he says. Jungkook shakes his head, I didn't. You didn't have to, Taehyung cuts in, he did it for you. The words hit like a blow. Jimin flinches. That's not. Isn't it? Taehyung challenges, his voice rising just slightly, because from where I'm standing it looks pretty clear. Jungkook looks at Jimin, something uncertain flickering in his eyes now. And Jimin sees it. That hesitation. That doubt. And it hurts more than anything Taehyung has said. Say something, Jimin whispers. Jungkook opens his mouth. But nothing comes out. The silence stretches. And in that silence, everything starts to fall apart. Taehyung exhales slowly, like he's finally accepting something he's been fighting for too long. Yeah, he murmurs, that's exactly it. Jimin's chest tightens painfully. Don't do that. Do what? Act like it's already over. Taehyung looks at him, something soft and broken in his gaze now. For me it kind of is. Jungkook's head snaps toward him. Don't say that. Why not? Taehyung asks quietly. It's the truth. No, Jungkook says, stepping forward again. The truth is we're all just overwhelmed right now. Taehyung shakes his head. You're not overwhelmed, you're just late. The words land cold. Jimin feels them settle deep in his chest. And for the first time since all of this started, he's not sure if choosing honesty was enough to save anything at all. Don't walk away. Jungkook's voice cracks just enough to betray him, the control he's been clinging to finally slipping as Taehyung turns toward the door. For a second, Taehyung pauses. Not because he's unsure, but because something in Jungkook's tone still has the power to reach him, and that alone makes everything worse. Why? Taehyung asks without turning around. So we can keep standing here pretending this isn't exactly how it was always going to end. It doesn't have to end at all, Jungkook says, stepping forward, desperation bleeding into his voice now. You're making it final when it doesn't have to be. Taehyung lets out a quiet breath, his hand resting on the doorframe. You're wrong, he says softly. It already became final the moment he said your name. Jimin flinches like he's been struck. That's not fair, he says, his voice tight. You're acting like feelings are something we can control. No, Taehyung replies, finally turning around, his expression calm but distant. I'm acting like choices are. The words hang heavy. Jungkook shakes his head. Then what about your choice? Walking away like this, is that really what you want? Taehyung meets his eyes. And for the first time, there's no deflection, no sarcasm, no guarded wall. Just something painfully honest. No, he says. That answer lands harder than anything else. Jimin's chest tightens, his voice softer now. Then don't. Taehyung's lips press into a thin line, his gaze flickering briefly between them before settling somewhere distant. Wanting something doesn't mean it's right to stay. Who decides what's right? Jungkook challenges immediately. Taehyung lets out a faint, bitter smile. Not us. That's exactly the problem, Jimin says, stepping forward now, his emotions rising again. We keep letting everything else decide for us. Fear, expectations, rumors. When do we actually choose for ourselves? Taehyung's expression hardens slightly. And what happens when choosing for yourself destroys everything around you? Then maybe it wasn't as strong as we thought, Jimin replies, though his voice wavers just slightly. Jungkook glances at him, something conflicted flickering in his eyes. Taehyung notices. Of course he does. You see that, Taehyung says quietly, nodding toward Jungkook. That hesitation, that's reality. I'm not hesitating, Jungkook snaps, but the defensiveness in his tone gives him away. You are, Taehyung insists. And you should be, because this isn't just about feelings, it's about consequences you can't undo. Jungkook exhales sharply, running both hands through his hair now, packing again like the walls are closing in. So what, you want us to just give up, pretend none of this happened? I want you to think before you decide something you can't take back, Taehyung says. I've been thinking about this for years, Jungkook replies, stopping abruptly. I just didn't say it out loud. And that's exactly why you don't understand what saying it now actually means, Taehyung counters. Jimin looks between them, his frustration boiling over again. Can both of you stop talking like this is some kind of irreversible disaster? It's just the truth, that's all it is. No, Taehyung says firmly. The truth is never just anything. It changes things, it exposes things, and once it's out you don't get to control how people react to it. Jimin clenches his fists. I'm not living my life based on what-ifs anymore. Taehyung studies him, something almost sad in his gaze now. You say that like you haven't been doing exactly that this whole time. Jimin falters. Because again, it's true. Jungkook steps closer to him instinctively, his voice softer. He's right about one thing. Both Jimin and Taehyung look at him. Jimin frowns. What? Jungkook hesitates. And this time the hesitation is clear. This changes everything, he says quietly. The words hit Jimin like a punch to the chest. So that's it, Jimin asks, his voice barely steady. You're backing off now. No, Jungkook says quickly, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Jimin presses, hurt creeping into his tone. Because it sounds like you're already reconsidering. I'm not reconsidering you, Jungkook insists. But you are reconsidering this, Jimin says, gesturing between them. Jungkook doesn't answer immediately. And that silence hurts. Taehyung exhales slowly, watching it unfold exactly the way he expected. This is what I was trying to tell you, he murmurs. It's not as simple as choosing a person, it's everything that comes with it. Jimin's eyes sting, but this time he doesn't let the tears fall. You said you wouldn't run, he says to Jungkook, his voice quieter now but cutting deeper. I'm not running, Jungkook replies, but there's uncertainty creeping in now, no matter how much he tries to hide it. It feels like you are, Jimin whispers. Jungkook's chest tightens. I just need time, Jimin interrupts, a hollow laugh escaping him. That's all you've ever needed, isn't it? That's not fair. No, Jimin agrees softly. It's not, but neither is this. Taehyung looks away, his jaw tightening again as the tension between them reaches a breaking point. This is exactly why I didn't say anything, he mutters. Because the moment it becomes real, it starts falling apart. Then why say it now? Jungkook asks, frustration flaring again. Taehyung's gaze snaps back to him. Because I was tired of pretending I wasn't affected by it. Because I didn't want to watch you two destroy yourselves without at least being honest about what was happening. Jimin shakes his head, his voice cracking slightly. We're not destroying ourselves. Taehyung doesn't reply. He doesn't need to. Jungkook exhales, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. We can still fix this. Fix what? Taehyung asks. The fact that you don't know what you're choosing, or the fact that no matter what you choose, someone's going to get hurt. The words land heavy. Jimin feels them settle deep in his chest. Maybe being hurt is unavoidable, he says after a moment, his voice trembling but steady enough. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Taehyung looks at him for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his eyes. You've always been like that, he says quietly, holding on to things even when they're already slipping away. Jimin's breath catches. And you've always been the one who lets go too easily, Jimin replies. That hits. Taehyung flinches, just barely, but it's there. I'm not letting go, he says. I'm choosing not to hold on to something that was never mine to begin with. The words hang in the air. Heavy, final, Jungkook steps forward again, his voice low. That's not true. Taehyung shakes his head. It is, you just didn't see it. Jimin looks between them, his chest tightening, the weight of everything pressing down harder than ever. So what now? He asks, his voice barely above a whisper. No one answers. Because for the first time, none of them knows. The phone rings. Sharp, sudden, cutting through the suffocating silence like a blade. All three of them freeze. Jungkook's head snaps toward the sound first, his chest still rising unevenly, his thoughts tangled and unfinished. Jimin doesn't move at all, as if even breathing might shatter whatever fragile balance is left. Taehyung glances toward the device on the table, his expression tightening immediately, as if he already knows this won't be anything good. It keeps ringing. Loud, insistent, unforgiving. Answer it, Taehyung says quietly. Jungkook hesitates. Something in his gut twists. Then he reaches for it. Hello. His voice sounds steadier than he feels. There's a pause on the other end. Then, we need you three now. The voice is clipped, professional and unmistakably serious. Jungkook's grip tightens around the phone. What's going on? Meeting room, 5 minutes. The line goes dead. Silence. Heavy, immediate, suffocating. Jimin exhales slowly, his hands curling into fists at his sides. That's not a coincidence. No, Taehyung agrees, his tone flat. It's not. Jungkook lowers the phone, his mind racing. You think this is about? Yes, Taehyung cuts in. I do. Jimin lets out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. Already, that fast? You said it yourself, Taehyung replies. They're watching. Jungkook's chest tightens. Then we don't give them anything. Taehyung laughs under his breath. You think we haven't already? The words hit harder now. Because they're no longer hypothetical. Jimin looks between them, something shifting in his expression. Not just fear, but a kind of clarity forced by pressure. Whatever this is, he says quietly, we face it together. Taehyung's gaze flickers toward him. Jungkook nods. But none of them look convinced. The walk to the meeting room feels longer than it should. Every step echoes. Every breath feels too loud. Jungkook walks slightly ahead, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight. Jimin follows close behind, his thoughts racing, replaying everything that just happened over and over again. Taehyung lingers just a step behind them both, quieter than usual, but his presence is heavy, grounded, like he's bracing for impact. The door is already open when they arrive. That's never a good sign. Inside, the room is colder than usual, the air conditioned to an almost sterile stillness. 2 managers sit at the table, their expressions neutral, but too neutral. Calculated. Controlled. Waiting. Sit. No greeting. No pretense. Jungkook feels his pulse spike as he steps inside, Jimin and Taehyung following. The door closes behind them with a soft click that sounds far louder than it should. For a moment, no one speaks. Then, there have been observations. The words are careful, measured, but unmistakably loaded. Jimin feels his stomach drop. Jungkook leans forward slightly. What kind of observations? A glance passes between the managers. Then one of them slides a folder across the table. Jungkook doesn't want to open it. But he does. Photos. Not explicit. Not obvious. But enough. A glance held a second too long. A hand brushing against another, not quite accidental. Moments frozen in time, stripped of context, turned into something else entirely. Jimin feels his breath hitch. Taehyung doesn't move. You understand why this is a concern, one of the managers says. Jungkook's fingers tighten around the edge of the folder. These are nothing. Individually, no, the other replies calmly, but together they create a narrative. Jimin finally speaks, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. A narrative based on assumptions. Perception matters more than intention, the manager says. Silence. Sharp. Unforgiving. Taehyung leans back slightly, his expression unreadable. So what are you saying? We're saying, the first manager replies, that boundaries need to be reinforced. Jungkook's jaw tightens. We already have boundaries. Then they need to be clearer. Jimin feels something in his chest twist painfully. You're asking us to act differently. We're asking you to be careful. That's the same thing, Jimin says. The manager doesn't deny it. Jungkook looks down at the photos again, anger simmering beneath the surface now. And if we do? The room goes still. The answer comes calmly. Then we intervene. The words land like a threat. Because they are. Taehyung exhales slowly, his gaze dropping to the table for a brief moment before lifting again. What does intervene mean? Another glance between the managers. Then, it means adjustments, schedules, interactions, public appearances. Jimin feels his chest tighten. You'd separate us, he says quietly. We'd do what's necessary. The simplicity of it is suffocating. Jungkook pushes the folder away, his voice sharper now. You're overreacting. No, the manager replies calmly. We're preventing escalation. Jimin looks at Jungkook, then at Taehyung, his thoughts spinning. This is real. This isn't just fear anymore. This is consequences. Immediate. Unavoidable. Taehyung leans forward slightly now, his voice controlled. And what exactly are you expecting from us? The manager meets his gaze, distance. The word echoes. Loud. Final. Jungkook shakes his head immediately. That's not happening. Jimin's heart skips. Taehyung's eyes flicker toward Jungkook. You don't get to decide that, the manager replies. Jungkook's voice hardens. Actually, I do. Tension spikes instantly. Jimin reaches out slightly, grabbing Jungkook's wrist under the table, subtle but firm. Don't, he whispers. Jungkook glances at him, something conflicted flashing in his eyes. Taehyung watches the exchange. Of course he does. They're not asking, Taehyung says quietly. Jungkook clenches his jaw. I don't care. You will, Taehyung replies, when it starts affecting more than just you. Jungkook pulls his hand away from Jimin's grip, frustration boiling over again. Why are you always on their side? I'm not on their side, Taehyung snaps sharper than before. I'm on reality's side. And what about us, Jungkook challenges. Taehyung hesitates. Just for a second. That depends on what us even means right now. The words hit harder than anything the managers have said. Jimin feels it immediately. The fracture. The doubt. And suddenly, this isn't just about outside pressure anymore. It's inside too. Enough, Jimin says quietly, his voice cutting through the tension. Both of them look at him. Even the managers pause. Jimin takes a slow breath, forcing himself to stay steady. We understand what you're saying. Jungkook turns to him sharply. Jimin. Let me finish, Jimin says, his tone firm. Jungkook falls silent. Barely. Jimin looks at the managers again. We'll be careful. The words feel heavy. Compromising. Necessary. The managers nod slightly, satisfied for now. Good, one of them says, that's all we're asking. But everyone in the room knows. It's not. The meeting ends too quickly. Or maybe not quickly enough. The moment they step out into the hallway, the tension explodes again. You agreed too easily, Jungkook says immediately, his voice low but sharp. Jimin turns to him, exhaustion and emotion mixing together. What did you want me to do? Start a fight we can't win? Yes, Jungkook snaps, if it means not letting them control us. Taehyung steps in before it escalates further. This isn't about control, it's about damage. I'm not something that needs to be managed, Jungkook fires back. No, Taehyung agrees, but the situation is. Jimin exhales shakily, his voice quieter now. We don't have the luxury of ignoring this anymore. Jungkook looks at him, hurt flickering in his eyes. So that's it, we just distance ourselves. Jimin doesn't answer immediately. Because the answer Hurt. Taehyung watches them both, something heavy settling in his expression again. This is what I meant, he says quietly. It's not just about choosing each other, it's about what you're willing to lose to do it. Jungkook looks between them, his chest tight, his thoughts racing. Jimin meets his gaze. And for a moment, everything hangs in the balance again. Only this time, the choice isn't just emotional. It's real. And it's already starting to cost them. The hallway feels colder than the meeting room. No one speaks at first. The silence isn't empty. It's heavy, filled with everything they didn't say inside, everything they still don't know how to say now. Jungkook leans against the wall, running both hands through his hair, his breathing uneven. Jimin stands a few steps away, arms wrapped around himself like he's trying to hold something together that's already starting to come apart. Taehyung lingers near the door, watching them both, quieter than ever. We can't keep doing this, Jimin says finally, his voice low but steady. Jungkook looks up immediately. Doing what? This, Jimin gestures faintly between them, his eyes tired but clear. Fighting each other when the real problem isn't even us. Jungkook exhales sharply. It is us, that's what they made clear. No, Jimin shakes his head. They made it clear that they're watching, that they're waiting for us to slip, but what we do next, that's still ours. Taehyung lets out a quiet breath, his gaze dropping briefly before lifting again. For how long? Jimin doesn't answer right away. Because that's the question none of them can answer. Jungkook pushes himself off the wall, stepping closer, his voice softer now but still intense. I don't care how long, he says. I just know I'm not going back to pretending. Jimin looks at him, something fragile flickering in his eyes. And what if pretending is the only way to protect what we still have? That's not protecting, Jungkook says. That's losing it slowly. The words linger. Because they're both right. And that's the problem. Taehyung shifts slightly, finally stepping forward, his voice quieter but grounded. There's a difference between losing something and choosing when to hold onto it. Jungkook frowns. What does that even mean? It means, Taehyung says, meeting his eyes, that not everything has to be fought out loud to be real. Jimin glances at him, understanding dawning slowly. You're saying we don't have to prove anything. Taehyung nods faintly, not to them. Jungkook exhales, his shoulders dropping slightly, the tension easing just a fraction. But what about us? Jimin steps closer now, not all the way, but enough that the space between them no longer feels like a divide. We know, Jimin says softly. Jungkook searches his face. That's enough for you. Jimin hesitates. Then nods. It has to be. There's a quiet kind of pain in that answer, but also something else. Acceptance. Not of defeat, but of reality. Jungkook looks at him for a long moment, his chest tight, his thoughts still loud and restless. But slowly something in him settles, not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Okay, he says finally. The word is simple. But it carries weight. Taehyung watches them both, something unreadable softening in his expression. This doesn't fix everything, he says. No, Jimin agrees, it doesn't. But it gives us a way forward, Jungkook adds. Taehyung nods once. For a moment, the tension between them shifts. Not gone, not resolved, but no longer tearing them apart. Jimin looks down at the letter still in his hand. The paper is wrinkled now, worn from being held too tightly, from carrying too much. He unfolds it one last time. The words are the same. They haven't changed. But he has. All of them have. Jungkook watches him carefully. What are you doing? Jimin doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he smooths the paper gently, his fingers lingering over the ink, over the past that brought them here. Then, he folds it again. But this time he doesn't hand it back. He slips it into his own pocket. Jungkook blinks, surprised. I thought you said you didn't need it anymore. Jimin looks at him, a faint, bittersweet smile touching his lips. I don't, he says softly, but I want it. Jungkook's breath catches slightly. Taehyung looks away, but there's a small, almost invisible shift in his posture. Something easing, something letting go. The three of them stand there for a moment longer, the weight of everything still present but no longer crushing. Not gone. Just understood. We should go, Tiang says quietly. Jimin nods. Jungkook hesitates for half a second. Then follows. They walk down the hallway together. Not too close. Not too far apart. Careful. Measured. But still together. And maybe that's what matters most. Not the answers they don't have. Not the future they can't predict. But the fact that, despite everything, they didn't walk away. Not completely. And somewhere between the silence, the distance, and the truth they now carry, something remains. Not loud. Not certain. But real enough to hold on to. Even if only in the quiet.